Hey, welcome to Coffee Compiler Club. Here today to talk about compilers and language runtimes and anything and everything to do with language implementations. And everyone's being recorded and will show up on YouTube within, a couple hours to a day. That's my opening spiel. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I've picked up a second project. It's keeping me busy an interesting amount of time at the moment. I've been making steady progress on AA, but I'm going to have to timeshare a little bit with it. So that's where that is.
You want to give us a summary of it?
Oh, of the new project? I need to, it's a startup. I need to talk to people before I say anything. I figure out what the right level to say stuff at is.
Oh, this is a do work, get money kind of project.
Yes, it hasn't made the get money kind of side of things yet. And the do work is kind of catch as catch can because there's no money involved, and so no. So yes, there's a theory that money shows up at some point. That's right.
I've worked at a few companies that had a theory that money would show up at some point.
Exactly. Well, this is a guy I've known for a long time, and he seems to have a sensible business model going on. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I've had a couple. Looking backwards, I probably had 6 companies. One paid out fairly well, one paid out okay, but way long after the fact. 2 kind of evened out and did nothing in the end, but sounded good. And 2 kind of, died a born-in, but they were there for a while. So as startups go in Silicon Valley, I have a pretty good track record.
I was at a startup that had a break-even point. They managed to sell, and the deal for the selling was that they would buy the employees options at the exact price they paid for them, and they paid back all of the VCs an exact 1x return.
Right.
And
exactly.
That was the sell the company deal. And I was like, yeah. Okay, right. Sure.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, I've been there. Not all
it wasn't what I was hoping for, but it's a lot better than just disappearing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So some money came around, but okay, fine. I had a job for a while. I had a salary. Maybe there was health insurance, maybe not. Yes, there have been a few of those. It is what it is.
Oh, I don't know. I still keep. I mean, everyone asks me, oh, what are you doing, Alan? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on a programming language. And I always feel bad because they're like, will it make money? Will it get profitable? And I'm like, probably not.
Well, that works right up until your parents get tired of funding you, and then.
Yeah, no, that's what's happening. Is my parents are like, there's a Starbucks that just opened. Maybe you should work there.
Yep. That's what it is.
I saw the opposite side of that once. I was working on a security team. And there was this one person who kept finding new ways to break and steal accounts and then was selling the accounts. And then all of a sudden he disappeared for 6 months. Wasn't on any of the forums, just gone. And one day he makes this post and everyone freaks out. And we're like, oh my God, we thought you got arrested by the FBI or something. What happened? And he said, oh, I made manager at the Burger King. So I don't have time for this anymore.
Well, you need to be paying them better than Burger King.
And I was like, okay, you gave up your life of hacking Google accounts because it was more profitable to work at Burger King. Yeah. Maybe you should come join the security team on the other side. We pay better than Burger King.
Yeah, I would hope so. Fine. Yes, I can sympathize with that.
I don't know. I mean, it does remind me though. I still haven't set up a donation page for my programming language. So
there you go. GoFundMe.
Maybe if I put it up, I'll suddenly start getting, thousands.
Maybe your parents will quit hassling you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get one company to bet hard on your programming language, their motivation to make you have enough money to not go away, it goes up a lot.
Goes up a lot. That's right.
Yeah.
But that would be a hard sell.
Yes.
It was the funny OpenSSL moment when they had Heartbleed. And they were look, I don't have enough money to have a test server that just tests this code every night for all of the regressions.
But already has hundreds of thousands of users, and the project was relying on. Alan have to somehow convince hundreds of thousands of people to use his programming language and say, fund me because I'm broke.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the plan. First, become wildly successful, and then put up a tip jar.
And then
Yeah,
right.
it's kind of different kind of capital you can capitalize on, a different kind of money, if you will, but you have to jump through.
Yep. They'll usually put some out. Yeah.
If you said that was your plan, would people get pissed that you're trying to get successful only to put up a tip jar? Like I had a lot of people tell me I should have the tip jar at the beginning.
Yeah. I think that's entirely fair.
I missed most of the sentence. Can you repeat it?
Well, I'm on my
Question
phone this
seemed to
time,
be, is
so
it a
I
good idea
don't
to
know.
start with a tip jar, or should you wait until you have demand before you put up a tip jar?
No. Would it be bad to not start with a tip jar? Because a lot of people are saying my project is suspicious because I don't have a tip jar.
I would
But
say
the reason why I
first,
don't have one is because it's less hassle.
I would say you have to first make yourself useful for something.
I don't have a tip jar either, and I'm not ready for public consumption. That's why.
Yeah.
Because something like Alan said, some company has to bet you, some has to take the risk with, but you have to show them something that is either going in the direction they're interested in, or either you have already something that can be useful for them.
It's a pretty high bar for programming language, other than incremental crowd growth because someone's in love with your model.
Because I would say 70% of the programming language already look alike, and there are pretty little room for improvement, for innovation. I would say you have to radically different idea, introduce a radically different idea, and make it work. At least
make it work. Yeah. Well,
so I'm reminded of Sublime Text, which falls in the same category of developers. It's hard to get developers to pay for tools. And they had a donation page where the minimum donation you could donate was $50. And you had to donate a multiple of $50. And their page was just like, look, if you're just using this for fun and you're not even getting $50 worth of value out of it, just use it. Like, don't worry about my tip jar. And if you're a programmer who's making $100,000 a year using Sublime Text every day as a tool, don't give me $5.
Did it work?
Like, their basic argument was most people are either getting nothing for using this tool or getting $50,000 to $100,000 a year for using this tool. If you're in the 50 to 100,000 bucket, $50, just give me. And he said that the donations, there were way fewer donations, but the total dollar amount of donations actually went up when they were like, look,
okay, that was the question.
Don't 5s or 10s me. Either give me $50 or give me nothing.
Or walk away. That's right. Okay.
Which I thought was an interesting.
Yeah.
It's different.
You know, for all NPRs, I do my fundraising twice a year. I think we still don't really have the clear answers of how open source projects should fundraise.
Okay, that's interesting. It's definitely a psychological hack you're going through there.
Well, like there was that guy who, what was it? It was like the $1 million homepage. He just sold like a pixel of each of an image for like $1. And then he made, it was a 1 million pixel image. So he made $1 million.
Oh, fuck, so, you know, in the 70s there were pet rocks too, but what the hell?
So like maybe I could like sell off pieces of syntax, you know, like, oh, you want the if statement? Gotta be
you have to pay $5.
Sponsored documentation.
Well, maybe you could charge for changing keyword spellings and names.
No, that would be a interesting model. You have to pay $5 for an if statement a month, and if you want to use classes, then it's 10 extra. So how far you want to go? You would be pretty efficient programming guy.
Or you can charge for variable names, suggesting variable names.
Yeah, I watch Potato McWhiskey do Civ 6, you know, runs through on hardest deity mode, whatever, and he takes money on the stream for naming his cities. They get misnamed by the local participants who throw $5 in the pot. That's
Yeah, I
not
guess
where I
for
want to
me-
go though. That's not the life for me.
I could do Twitch streams, but like I'm not really that great at a person on like video streaming things. I don't know. Like
You
I mean,
will-
like if you had to choose between like me and Theodore on like a Twitch stream, which would you pick?
Oh my God, I turn on Pornhub. What are you talking
Oh,
about?
it's on. Oh, it's on.
You got the wrong kind of competition going on here, guy.
I don't know. There's some popular Twitch streamers who are just streaming themselves, writing code.
I can't do that. I watched the Prime guy, whatever, a couple times and stuff. It's like, if I'm going to code, it's usually I have to get focused and in deep, and I can't take the interplay thing and also code. Now I can do what he does where he's like abusing some stupid language, bad code smell thing. Because that's really not coding in my head per se. That's talking about the philosophy, what the fuck is going on here and why people care or don't care about this. That's a different one. I can do that on stage fine, but I can't actually code.
I mean, I talk to myself when I debug, even if I'm by myself.
Yeah, but okay, but do you go read the Twitch stream and answer it while you're debugging? Right. I don't do any verbal processing, inward verbal processing while I'm coding. I will sometimes bitch and moan and talk it out, but I won't be taking it in while I'm coding. It's the other way only. That I don't know. That's me, my special.
When I'm listening in, I can only write documentation. I can't focus on actual code.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. It's the same thing. I can write little toy examples in whatever, like the CC Discord. I had mistyped like 2 or 3 times the stupid little example with ++ on arguments. And Alan and Levo were like, wait a second, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, oh, excuse me. But that's the level of coding I can get while I'm talking. It just is what it is.
Well, I mean, like I haven't written any code. I'm still writing documentation. So like, it's. I mean,
You gotta sit down and write some code at some point, guy. That's the only way. There's a big jump between it ought to do and it does do.
Well, it's like there's so many papers, it's like every time I want to do something, I'm like, are there any papers on this? And the answer is always yes. Someone wrote a paper. I don't get to write code. I have to read this stupid paper and like figure out how they implemented it.
And
You can
no-
write code, you just have to stop reading new papers. You've got more than enough to make progress.
There was
Every
a
time
saying-
I read a paper, I feel like my experience is better than what the paper is suggesting. It's very strange.
Oh boy, I went down that path for a long time. There are not many real competitors to C2 in the sense that they have a large market share that's well understood for performance and it does all these things. There's a handful, there's not a whole lot. And so, my competition was typically academic papers talking about theoretical things that a compiler could do versus we actually done it and it was worth something.
I've certainly had debates with people of C2 versus V8.
Oh, V8. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, JavaScript has a separate set of problems to solve. So, my theory on JavaScript or V8 is that they can't hit Java numbers, but they can get close, but they can't because they have a different problem to solve. They don't have any type info. So they have to put tests in everywhere and have an ever expanding ring of guarded area where they know the types well enough to optimize anything worth a crap. And Java doesn't have that.
Yeah, also,
Although it's gotten really good at building really large islands of type stuff.
It could be, and maybe that's the correct answer. People write code that they intend to be the certain type, and after they prove it, you can get a big island, and maybe that's the right answer, and maybe they can catch up to C2 in all the places that matter.
also not
This
uncommon.
reminds me of null. What do you guys think of a nullable bool equals false? Should that be a compile error or should that be true only if it's equal to false? Like, do you need to do the null check if you're doing?
I didn't even
nullable
understand
bool?
that. What do you mean by a nullable bool? Do you mean a pointer to a bool?
You can think of it that way. I just saw this question the other day. By nullable bool, it could be like an optional type. It could be nullable in like a language that supports it or anything.
Yeah, depending on the exact semantics of your thingy, you may want like a tri-state thing and not like this
Yeah,
hierarchical dual state.
True, false, and file not found.
See, but my concern was most people would think if you see a variable equals false, it would only execute it when it's false, which is totally what I'm expecting. But my question is, should it be a compile error because you didn't check for null?
okay. So
What is the type of the variable?
I'm hearing two different things. One is what's the Boolean representation issue, and one is does the compiler check for null or the runtime? Like in the land of C, compiler never checks for null, you just crash. Java was considered a giant step up, I think still to this day, because it checks for null and you get a polite crash. You get a null pointer exception at the Java level, which is very far removed from a hardware MPE. Then there are languages like Kotlin for which will demand that they know it's not null. And if they don't know, it's an error for you to not check for null and put a handler for being null. And so there's a, you know, the language says you can't be null. There is, when you do it, when you dereference it, there is the, if it's null, we're going to catch it and throw a polite error with totally guaranteed semantics. The semantics for Java are extremely well understood. At this bytecode, you throw this exception and nothing, everything before it happened and everything after didn't, and all that kind of shit. Or your C, where it's considered undefined behavior and, you know, all hell breaks loose. So, you know, what kind of thing are you looking for?
The question was about Boolean.
Yeah, he's
Doesn't-
writing some code. Somebody's writing code. I assume anonymous
Yeah.
Narwhal is
Isn't Boolean is a primitive? It has to have a value, like the primitive types.
for AA. There is no primitive bool. Your truthy or falsy int 0 is counts as falsy. There's a nil, which is also int 0, but nil is also every pointer.
But that means it can convert itself to a default value. That's how you do
Yes.
it is a separate concern.
It's a separate, well, there's no conversion per se, but nil is false and everything else is true.
It's not conversion. It can figure out what the default
Test it.
value is.
Yeah, it can be tested for truthy or falsy.
You know,
That's the
I think
difference
we argued
for
about
that.
this on the Discord. We were like, you know, well, do you actually have a separate Boolean type or not? I was trying to convince you that it was worthwhile.
Oh,
So
were you? I didn't
should
catch
this
that. I
if-
don't have a separate Boolean type.
Yeah.
So should
yeah,
the if
and I
run
think
the
it's worthwhile because,
block?
like, you know, all the cool languages have Boolean type.
Yeah, and I lived with them and I lived without them both for 20 years in both directions. And I much prefer to not screw around with a separate Boolean type.
Well, like,
I
mean,
kind of like it because of
should
false and short circuits.
No, short circuit still happens. I have the notion of truth and false. I definitely have short circuit behavior. I don't have a separate Boolean type. It's not necessary to
Oh.
do short circuit.
well, I'm not
Specifically, I was thinking it's accidentally not causing a short circuit because it's like
No, ints of 0 cause a short circuit, which is the normal behavior for C programs. I'm using the C model here on purpose. It totally is well defined and well spec'd and understood, and the short circuit works like it's worked for everybody else for 20 years, 40 years.
so the
It
question
depends
is
on
why-
like
so in the
Okay, wait.
example,
Wait. We got too many people talking at once. Alan's been trying to get some word in edgewise. Go, Alan.
Yeah, so I was saying, so like, okay, so we had this discussion, it was like February 12th when I wrote it. So I was saying you shouldn't have just one Boolean type or not even a Boolean type. You should have 4 Boolean types. You should have true, false, yes, no, on, off, and 0 and 1.
I'm not doing that. You can
That's
add those easily in
that's
AA.
a
That's
four-
just assign a variable name there.
That's
all
a 4
fine.
representations of a Boolean.
Right, and they're
values.
all different and they're all useful. So it's like, why would you restrict your language, which I will remind you is for expressing your intent, to like
Yes.
say, oh, well, actually, you can't say that this means on because actually, you know, you can only say 0. And
Yeah,
you're like,
No,
why-
you don't
I
have
don't
to
know
only
if I
say
am-
0, Alan. You just assign it to a variable, and now you have
Why?
false. The way you
As a
like.
Why
term,
would you want
either
on one all the way?
well, that's the point. Is sometimes you want on to mean 0, and sometimes you want on to mean 1, and so they're actually distinct concepts.
Yeah, but that's not a language feature. That's a
Hint, hint, that's a
program of the
perfect,
moment feature.
perfectly
Can you
new
address the
new type
cost of,
has. Go ahead. Joe.
okay, yeah, can you address the cost of, okay, I got a Boolean, it's 32 bits and it's 0,
No,
which makes it
Stop.
false.
you made a
know,
you made
like-
an invalid assumption. I have a Boolean. It says nothing about the size of the Boolean. Now, if you want to
said
force
you don't
it to
have
be
a
32
Boolean
bits,
type, therefore you're using promotion to 32 bits. Or
no, I'm not.
Not in Java.
Not in anything. There's nothing that you can tell under the hood that an array of Java Booleans takes 1 byte per element or 1 bit per element. You can't tell, except via performance issues.
Yeah.
That is the representation of the bool.
Yeah, it's a
The
representation,
concept
but-
of the boolean always have 2 literals, a true and false. If you want Alan to rename them, you can type them to on and off. They still would
Yeah.
mean true. They would still mean that the type has 2 known literals, 2 known values. Either however you want to name them. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right, but if I replace a Boolean with an enum, so that now instead of just saying if switch, I say if switch equals on, if switch equals off, I think I've improved the readability of my code.
Yeah, but that's not a
But you
language
still-
feature.
Yeah,
You
but
can just
you-
write that directly in code.
I mean, the
Obviously.
enum's a language feature.
Well, no,
Okay.
it's a language feature to say, I have an on and an off that are named however I want to name them, filled with the values or whatever. Those are the names I give it, and then I switch on
Right.
it. That's fine.
I'm saying the language feature you need for that is just enum.
You want a complete enum that you can use in a switch, so the switch can skip the. Yeah, you want to be complete. Yes, that's a separate thing from true and false. The completable enum.
That is how you emulate a boolean. You can use.
You
a-
can
you
emulate it.
can-
Yes, you can
That's
emulate a
fine.
Boolean with a completable enum, and then you don't know what the values are picked for the true and the false you put in your completable enum. The JIT picks the number.
But I would still
if
put a
that-
boolean as a primitive type.
In my language, you can do int plus bool, but you cannot do int plus enum.
Yes, and that would be true for me as well if you had an enum, because unless you put an injector in. Yes, correct. You'd have to put an injector for AA as well for the same thing.
I at least my personal opinion is for the base language, you should have a separate Boolean type. It is useful for encoding that semantic intent and restricting
I hear
the.
you. Like I said, I've used them both for 20 years in both directions.
We can
And it
argue.
is never worth it to have the separate bool, or the number of cases where it's really worth it is just so small that it's not worth it.
Which
I've
brings me
gone
back to the
round
piece
this
of,
one for a long
There's no
time.
real cost.
which goes back to this code snippet.
Sure.
Should this if be run?
Which code snippet? The one that's in the current doc?
Yeah.
Let me go screen share it.
I mean, you may want to rewrite it as more AA before you answer the question, but
Well, okay, so
That should,
while we're screen- I wanted to say that like the reason this is an argument is that like apparently there was some bureaucratic language like Ada where they were like, oh, well actually, people are going to get the conversion from Boolean to integer wrong. So we have to make an explicit Boolean type and have 2 operators for like
Yeah.
that say whether true is 0 or true is 1.
Okay. So hang on for a second. I'm asking a question. Whoever wrote this, what was the intent of the code? Because I don't have a way to. I don't read it right now. I can't understand how to read it.
okay, so B is set to null and is
Okay.
of the type nullable Boolean.
Okay, so bool here is expected to be nullable, which makes it like a pointer type. So you have
Right,
a
it is
3-way
a
logic.
Bool question mark.
Okay. Yeah.
So
true,
there's
false,
3
null.
possible states, true, false, and null.
Okay. So
And I say if B equals false,
right.
block.
Depends on the language, right? It should be null pointer if it's null.
So in the land of Java, it would be false. So the code will not run because null is not equal to the constant value false, which in Java is a pointer. It's a capital F false of a real pointer object.
Right. But in
So-
AA, you were using 0 for null and you were using 0 for false.
Oh, you're asking if I compare a pointer to a 0. Yes, so false doesn't exist in AA, so you have to define what you mean by false, which you can go either way. So if you can say false is null, and there's no null, it's just this null, what do you want to call it, typed as a Boolean question mark. Now I have the question, is nil equal to nil? 0 equals 0. The answer is, of course, yes.
There's a slight language semantic question. So when you say nullable bool, what is that? Is that a pointer to a bool?
Yeah, hang on. Right, exactly. So separately, we don't have here is that bool is itself. Well, I can't type here. Bool is itself something, some version of predicate here typed as a struct, which has a true or false flavor, or it can be nil. See, bool is typed, right? That's sort of the bool
now
type.
you have a Boolean type.
Yeah, there's no Boolean type, so I'm making a Boolean type in the language.
But along with it, you create something that has a reference that can be null to it.
Yeah, that's
Correct?
the question mark at the end.
That's the problem. If it's a value type, then it's a primitive. Then it cannot be uninitialized.
Right. So the question that Aaron's putting out here is sort of misformed from AA's point of view, and there's an easy translation to get the easy answer for AA, but that doesn't apply to like anybody else, really. There is no Boolean type, so you faked one. So however you wrote code in AA, you did. Then there's no false or true, so you faked one. However you wrote that, you did. Now those semantics are straightforward when you look at the code that you wrote, but you implemented a bool. So choose to implement your bool in pure AA syntax however you like, and then we'll just run the code and tell you what the answer is. That's not necessarily what other people are thinking, because when you say, I used a bool, there is no AA bool. So make one. Now that you've made one, it's just AA code you're running, and whatever that code does, it does. Rename bool to pizza, and you get the same answer, right?
What's the cost of adding a Boolean that's preventing you from doing so?
The cost is simply the semantic overhead that is not necessary in over and over and over and over and over again whenever I do shit. It happens all the time. And I've watched C programmers live without it for 40 years, and that doesn't seem to burn them. And I watch Java programmers do it, and it doesn't seem to burn them either, except that they say, if X equals 0 so many times, if XX equals null so many times. And I don't need a pointer equal null if I just want to test pointer for nullness or not. But I have to write it out longhand a billion times over. So that's my take on it. No penalty either way, really, except it's more verbose in the land of Java.
Okay, so would this be a sort of AA solution?
The second code block, we say bool is some v, which is typed as an int1 and is nullable. And then you say b, which you didn't say is a nullable, and then you give a constructor. You have to put a constructor here for these two guys. You call the constructor to make a bool. I think I'm writing in the code block that you intend.
But that I1 is a 1 byte.
That's a 1 bit.
1 bit.
Yes.
Okay, that's
He's
fine.
declared a 1 bit variable there, and then he's come along and said, what do I do with this?
I mean, I should probably make it unsigned because it's bool, but whatever.
Yeah, right. And the deal here is that the false and true are not interned. So the second call to bool, which I was trying to write and got my friends misbalanced, makes a new bool object, just like we placed bool with bool in Java. Capital B bool in Java. You made a new object for bool 0, you made a new object for bool of 1, you made a new object for the second bool of 0. Those are 3 different objects.
And you
It's
think this can
not-
be made cheap by a JIT?
I'm sorry?
And this can be made cheap by a JIT?
But the semantics are you have 3 objects for 2 state things. You have 2 different bool zeros. That's the normal semantics. Same for Java for capital I integer. If you call the normal constructor, he tries to cheat through a cache and give you integer of 0 is the same as integer 0. But you can make an integer 0 that doesn't go through the cache, and it's just a different object, capital I integer, with a 0 value than the other one. And if you throw this in a hash table and you do a standard hash lookup, and I look for int 0 in the hash table, he'll fail. Because the first int 0 was one type object, and the second int 0 was a different object, and the 2 ints are not pointer equivalent, you know, an identity hash table, and it'll say no. So it's not.
And I
the
think that
semantics
caused
thing.
Java developers some pain that not all falses were equal.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, you know, this
Or
is
at least not all falses were equal with the syntax of equals equals.
yeah, right. And so this is one of the interesting known, you know, tricky fails people go around here on. Two capital I integers are not necessarily equal because they're not integers, they're pointers. And it's just two random pointers are equal or not.
So should there be a way to express, look, I'm thinking of these things as a value type. For any given value, these things should be equal.
Right. So
These are
in the
not
language
identity
Java-
carrying types. These are value carrying types.
The
I hear
only
you.
restriction you have to require that has to be initialized. That's fine.
Right. Java's having a lot of trouble bolting that on after. I've never heard you talk about that as an AA thing.
Okay, so I'm sorry, what was the last thing? Because I was going to answer your prior question. There's a prior
Java has had trouble bolting value types on after
Yes,
without
yes.
breaking the world. So is AA going to think about value types from day one?
Yeah, I have. That's already the case. So the value types that are floating around that you call here, they are they have a class. U1 has a class. That class has functions on it. Those functions can be called. They're usually going to be operators. Operators are all just fields that you load from the class of the primitive and get a function out and you execute the function. So U1 has a class, which would inherit from a class of unsigned and, you know, whatever U1 inherits from U2 up to, I haven't built that hierarchy because it just goes straight to int right now because there's no need to build a hierarchy yet, but I can add the hierarchy as going forward. So, you know, U1's operators are different from int's operators if I want it to be. But any integer-like thing will have an int class behind it. You can load fields from the object that will give you the fields that you loaded. And I'll show you that the semantics for that are, where do you want to put it? Down here?
Because I feel like as I've written it, by using a struct, I introduced identity.
Yeah, as soon as you say struct, you have an identity. So the
Struct without.
They don't really want identity. I just want a nullable bool that's a value, but
Yeah,
a nullable value.
So you can't do it with struct notion. And then I'm writing it down here. So
I don't know who's sharing their screen, but like I can't see what Cliff's writing.
okay, I'm writing down the third block. It says ints have a class with Z's.
All right.
You enlarge the font a little bit.
So ints have a class. I give an int. I don't know how to highlight it for you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Because it has a class, I can load from it. There are no fields on the 7. So I go up to its class. I look for stir, and then I walk up the superclass chain looking for stir. Once I find a stir, I load the field. Having loaded that field, it turns out it's a function. I can call it. So I add friends to call it. So that's a standard sort of function lookup sequence. So in particular, 2 plus 3 has an operator. The parser treats that as syntactic sugar. And expands it. It loads the operator field name, which is the operator extended by underscores to match the operands. Loads an unresolved field, then calls a function. So there are 2 separate loads. There's an unresolved field, which is a, I'll put it in the comments a little better. Whoops. So you get the int, you get a field lookup on the int that fails or no fields in the int. He goes to the int's class, asks again, and he walks up that chain until he finds the integer class, which has underscore plus underscore. That returns me a set of overloaded functions. The dot underscore is a field that will be resolved at typing time as to which of the operator overloaded functions you're going to want. It's the only one that is type correct at that location. Having now loaded a function, I call it with the second operand, the right-hand side operand. And that is the semantic for adding function calls and operands and operators and everything to ints. And so
why do you need the dot underscore?
that's
Why
a
can't
field
you
load.
do the type-based resolution just on
Yeah. Okay.
underscore plus underscore of 3?
Dot field label has the same semantics unless it's dot underscore, which is a field label that I'm going to resolve.
That,
So-
I believe, amounts to a selection from.
Well, yes, it does, but there's more generality to it. I can do lots of things with that underscore that are not necessarily what you're expecting.
Hmm.
I went for the minimalist set of language features that would give me operator overloading and type coercion, standard type coercion between ints and strings and floats, except that I have full control and I can hand the control over to the user who can have full control over things. So that second dot underscore, that's a field load, but I don't know the name of the field yet. Now he loaded a tuple, so the tuple gave him a set of function choices. I need to pick which choice, but I'm not going to say that every tuple, when applied, always picks one of its choices. That's not how tuples behave. A tuple is a tuple. It's not applied. This doesn't support a function call. So the first dot under plus under loaded me a tuple. Then the second dot underscore, I'm going to figure out which field it's 0, 1, 2, 3 because it's a tuple. And then I'll replace the dot under with like dot 0 or dot 1. And that will then do a field load of dot 1 and pull up whatever dot 1 is in that field, which will happen to be, in this case, it'll have to be a function to be correctly typed, it'll be a function. I'll apply the 3 for the first arg and the 2 for the this arg or the 0 arg. And I'll call that function.
So dot under is a arbitrary function that exists on underscore underscore plus?
No. Dot under is a generic, I'm going to pick a field. Let me give you another example of dot under. It's not, whoops, somebody else has been hacking in here. Let me go show you what dot under does in another context here. So red is a tuple of red and some hex value 1, 2, 3. And blue is a tuple of a string blue and 0, 4, 5, 6 as the hex blue version. And then somewhere in the world, I can say, if some conditional, pick red or pick blue. And oh, what do I want to do with them? Well, let me see here. Why is my home key not doing here? I wanted to pass them to the RBG, draw a pixel. And what that meant was I'm going to pick the 1, 2, 3. Let me go to the dot underscore here. I'm going to there it goes. I'm going to pick the 1, 2, 3 instead of the quote red quote pass to draw pixel. And the other one is I said sys.print of cond here. Let's do this way. Some color is this. And here I can say some color dot underscore and carry on. And that would give me, what can we print here? Actually, this prints both strings. And so that's not a valid one. Whatever, something's going on like that.
So is it fair to describe dot under as please iterate through the tuple from the left till you find something that's not a type error?
No, but you're very close. It is, please pick the one valid type choice or you're ambiguous. And you get an ambiguity type error. If there is exactly one choice, that's
if there's two choices, fail. You lose.
That's right. That's right. There's two choices, you fail. You must be unambiguous. So in all contexts, it can be unambiguous. Now I can make a color constructor. It can have functions that do the dot underscore embedded within it as appropriately in different places, or I can pull the dot under wherever I want out. I have these test cases floating around in AA. Let me see if I can go find a nice test case here.
Did you have a use case that made you think of that syntax? Because that's very interesting.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to do in any normal typing system out of between C and Haskell and Java, if I say 2 plus 3.14, the answer is widened on 2, right? So if you look at the Haskell, Hindley-Milner style typing systems, whenever you have to do mixed typing between ints and floats, you have a screw up in the typing system. Haskell has type classes to support this kind of stuff, but everybody does something weirdly special here. And I was like, what is my weirdly special hack going to be so I can do strong Hindley-Milner style typing while I have to automatically support widening of ints and floats so I can write algebra expressions the way you expect and get the answer that you expect.
And dot under be put on anything other than a tuple.
Yes, we put on any struct. I could name these red, blue, green things as structs. Oh, geez, go away, Google. Google's trying to tell me to get a calendar. I could totally just do this kind of a thing for both of those, and it would the same way. He would pick the dot. The name would be name, or the name would be RGB. I was getting a test case out, and then I got sidetracked. I have some more.
Those at least have the same fields. I was thinking, what happens if your structs are like red equals number, blue equals number?
You have to have a
Like,
struct.
do the structs have to be like the same shape?
No. The structs, as soon as you apply Hindley-Milner rules, there will be a unification made. If you have a single dot under field and he's taking a variety of structs coming in, Hindley-Milner will tell me which fields are available common across all members that are being presented to this dot under. That's a well-defined behavior of Hindley-Milner when applied to structs. Ignoring dot under, if you don't use dot under and your program has to well type under Hindley-Milner rules. If it does well type, then at the point you will add a dot under, you'll know what set of fields are available.
Do you ever worry that it feels too much magic?
And not yet, because I haven't been coding in anger on it. I have to write.
Okay.
I have to write enough code to decide that it's confusing or not. Like if you don't ever use dot under, you'll never see it, you'll never know it, you'll never care. It'll look like I do field widening on ints and floats, and it's not going to, the core libraries aren't going to start out having lots and lots of uses of dot under. There's some sort of secret auto conversion under the hood going on. Okay, but that's true of C, it's true of Java, it's true of OCaml and Haskell and everybody else. Fine. Ints and floats get a magic widening trick done.
But it
you
means I
have
could
to
do something silly like, this is my HTTP error code class. And if you ask it to be a string, it's a string. And if you ask it to be a number.
That's correct.
Like I'm going to get 404 object not found if I ask it to be a string. And I'm just going to get the number 404 if I ask it to be a number.
You still have to use a dot under in there. Like the times and places where I automatically insert a dot under are just on the operator expansion. So you wrote a dot under in your code somewhere. Now you might have wrapped it around some other fields and whatever, operators or whatever. So the user who's using it doesn't see where you put dot under. But as an implementer, you wrote dot under. That meant that you knew at the time you wrote it that you're expecting to have a polymorphic choice that's going to change. It's going to figure it out when it gets there.
Yeah, seems like the kind of thing that's going to be deep inside libraries a lot, and that most developers aren't going to write a lot.
That's my theory. Yeah. And the other hack going on here is dot under has to resolve to a single field at typing time. It does not dynamically pick fields.
You have to be specified what dot under means in all circumstances.
Yeah, in theory, it has to be well typed as to which field is going to get picked. If you knew the types because you're paying careful attention, you could have just put the name in yourself. I'm doing it so the operator here doesn't have to have it, and a user doesn't have to write, convert the int to a float like an Elm. I have to convert my int to a float, and then I do float plus float addition. I have to manually convert the int to a float.
But it is better than doing it yourself, because if I have a function that's got a dot under in it, and I call it in a bunch of different contexts, sort of genericness can flow through it.
It does demand that it resolves to a single field name. So
right, but if I call the same function in two different places,
right,
where different things are being passed in,
yes,
Henry Milner is essentially going to clone it and figure it out.
Yeah, yes, except here for the dot under, it is not being flown by Henry Milner. It is not a polymorphic field name. And I went back and forth on whether or not to make it a polymorphic field name or not. But if I make it a polymorphic field name, I don't have an efficient implementation at runtime. So I weakened it to say it's not polymorphic. All users have to finally, oh, Levo got kicked out. It's his phone dropping. I was still
I
trying
guess
to pull
that
something.
leaves me the question, if I would like polymorphic dispatch, how do I ask for that?
I'm going to hand you something that'll get you a V table with single class inheritance overloading, and it will, you know, do what you expect. Where's a better example? I have like these really complicated ones to torture the type system. I have some simple. Here's a larger simple one. Let me show you this example here. This is the same thing. And I'm going to dump in and then clean up because it's wrapped in the test harness. So you get all kinds of ugly things here.
It's kind of interestingly symmetric because you can use it either in the parameter, or you can use it to pick which of a set of functions can take that parameter, which is kind of cool.
Okay, so you know, you could write something like this. I have a color constructor. I have a color constructor. It just makes a pair. It could be a named thing with hex, whatever. This is, by the way, core AA, so it's a type theory version of language. It doesn't have AA syntax per se. Then I make a couple guys, red and blue. Let me go get my color constructor bold. Fine, I can't do it. Why are you being this evil to me? Fine. Okay, light says make a lighter version of the color. And stupidly, light just says, oh, you know, I'm going to decrement the color to make it lighter, and I'm going to say something about the name for, oh, I had true and false, and it should be light. Yeah, this should be something's going on here where I'm trying to do something stupid. I was using decrement because that was what I had in core AA, and so just subtract.
This reminds me of the situation where I tell people it's something you have to try to actually know if it's good or bad, because a lot of people would just like question if my syntax is a bad idea, but since I tried it already, I know it's not a bad idea. So this seems really weird, but I bet when we try it, it's going to be like fine, and I can see that this might not be too much magic, since you only resolve it to like one. Since it has to match only to one type or variable.
We get that correct here. There you go. Something like that. That's more like AA syntax.
So what dot under evaluates to here in the light expression?
Yeah, okay, so at the end of typing, I will have replaced dot under with dot zero, into my dot zero, and dot one. That's the result of typing.
The tuples, in case.
Yeah, the tuple members. So if I come up here and say I don't want to make a tuple, I want to use a type here. Color is an at hex, blah blah blah. So your name is type string, and your hex, your RGB, GB is type int, like this. So I define color to be a type, and then I'd call the color constructor, and I have these backwards, so I have to reorder my parameter names. Fine. So there's a color constructor. Let's reorder my parameter names. I don't care. One of the goals of reordering the parameter names, I didn't have to change the dot under anywhere either. So, you know, here is la 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 la. Okay, and then you know this is back to dot under, and it picks which one it's going to be. All right, and then I want to call the color constructor. Instead, and he's taking.
Now that I'm looking at it, it doesn't look so bad. It might be a little less readable, but if you also have tons of them in a single code block, it might be more readable since you don't see the same words over and over.
Yeah, it's not repeating the field names over and over and over again. Yeah, yeah.
So what you did for the last is kind of disambiguating what you're talking about. But if you leave color, what would happen here? And later down, you call light with the color structure. What will happen?
Well, okay. So the dot under says I'm going to load from this structure, color structure, and I'm being applied. I look for the operator minus. Okay, the operator minus doesn't happen on string, does happen on int. So I have exactly one match. That is, I take the C dot under, I say, you have to have a class which supports an operator minus. I walk the choice of fields. One of them's an int, one of them's a string, only one of them has an operator minus. Okay, I got an operator minus, done. There's exactly one correct choice and I'm walking away. When I do the second guy, light plus C under, I look at operator plus on strings. I come up with a set of plus choices for strings. Well, string plus string is there, but string plus int is not there. So when I look at my int, I'll say no, and I look at the string, I'll say yes. I have a single unambiguous choice. I'm done.
So here we will look for the something that have a string on the for the operator. The operator will look on the left side, has to have a string and say, oh, this has to be a string because I have an operator.
Yeah, I mean, operator plus could have other right-hand sides, and I could add more over time. But at the default starting thing, the plus will only have string or nil on the right-hand side, nullable string on the right-hand side. Int is not a nullable string, done.
I'm curious how you keep track of the what type has how many implementations, how many overloads has a operator do.
Well, that's a tuple put on the operator. I mean, put in the class. So the integer class going up to the top where I said 2 plus 3, and I expanded it to under plus under, that loads a tuple of choices. Those choices I'm writing into the primitive library. And I have choice for int plus float and int plus int right now.
So in the implementation, you specify which.
Yeah, in implementation, and if I did my own operator overloading, I have to have a tuple because the parser will put in that second field load. So you must have a tuple. And then the tuple has however many functions you want. Always in those functions, the 0th argument is the this pointer. And the 1th argument has to be distinguishable by the typing system. You may also have other things in that tuple that are not functions, and they'll never match because you're being applied in a function call. So they're not functions, they won't matter. So you can pile junk into that tuple as long as you supply a function whose left-hand side and right-hand side, match types.
So you defined light in the context of colors.
LITE or the string light? LITE.
LITE, the function.
Yeah.
If I then call that the way I drew it in the bottom line.
I make a new string, I added some.
Here's my new anonymous struct. It's got a string, it's got a number, and it's got a random other object that is not relevant.
Yes.
This should work.
The requirement is the one field choices. There's one field choice for all colors. So C dot under right now in color of C dot under, I'm going to highlight it and change it. It's the underscore becomes a 0 in the first part of the program. So I load the 0th field out of your struct. That's a string called A. That's not correct. I'll claim I don't have a valid choice across all my guys.
Yeah, but C doesn't know that it's in a call to color. It just knows that it's operating on the thing that got passed in.
That's correct. And it has to resolve to be.
And the thing that got passed in is an anonymous function.
Things that got passed in is an anonymous struct.
Sorry, an anonymous struct.
That's correct. As long as its .0 field is typed as an int, it'll have an operator minus that supports an int. As long as its field, as long as its .0 field supports an operator whose right-hand side is integer and whose left-hand side is the same, is self. So there's a version of your second example which works, and I can show you that here by hacking your example.
But that's my question. Why doesn't this example just create a second compilation of light that takes my anonymous struct as opposed to the version of light that took a color?
Because then I'm demanding at typing time that I do arbitrary levels of inlining in order to get a precise answer. Or I have to be polymorphic. There are two known solutions to your problem. I either am polymorphic on field resolution, which requires me to have a dynamic field resolution, which I don't have an efficient way to do, or I demand inlining. And
so if I wrote this line of code as you have it right now, would it yell at me that I've called light with two different kinds of inputs? So that's an
I'm
error.
sorry. You have a light 2. You've called it with a C, which demands it to be a struct, which has a field that has an int and a field which has a light, and all callers. You have no callers of light 2. So as soon as you have no callers of light 2, the typing system like, ha,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
dead.
I don't have to resolve this field. Fine. Like if I export light 2 as a function to a module outside the world, it's not yet resolved. When I link it against all other modules, it must resolve at that time to a single field.
But
It doesn't have
not
to resolve
resolved is synonymous for polymorphic or the unbound types.
Yeah, it's an unbound type until it gets resolved. That's correct. But it's not polymorphic, it's unbound.
It's unbound. Okay.
This reminds me of me not wanting templates in my language because I didn't want to inline too much and I didn't want to do the polymorphic thing.
What Aaron is asking me to do is to force inlining at typing time. Now, the optimizer might optimistically inline in order to get better performance. That's one thing. But to get a type out, I have to decide when to stop inlining or what the rules are that I can.
Right. You would have to collect every call site that thing had and come up with a type that makes them all happy.
Yes.
Or enough clones of the function to make them all happy.
Or enough clones, right. And this is arbitrary cloning at typing time. The optimizer can cut off inlining at any point and just be slow. That's okay.
Both would
But it's
upset
not
me.
arbitrary cloning. It's only cloning up to the number of times your function is called.
No, you
right?
can pass functions.
Can I make it go exponential?
Yeah, it can go exponential, yeah. You can pass functions to functions to functions to functions, carrying these underscores through, and it can just go exponential on you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If it's combinatorial, then I accept that that's wrong.
Yeah,
if it was
yeah,
just
yeah,
the
yeah.
number, if it was limited by the total number of call sites in the entire program, then I'd be fine with it.
No, I went down that path. And then I, came up with test cases and like, run away. I have much worse test cases, by the way. I can pull out some things that are really, really ugly looking.
So what is the error I get if I type this line?
You'll probably get an unresolved field in light 2 or light. You'll get an unresolved field error. I couldn't resolve it, and I'll give you some types. I'll say, and one of my choices was field 0 was the A field with stir, and one of my choices was field 0 was RBGB as an int. And I can't figure out that field 0 works here, and I can't figure it out for 1 either. So
I wrote light 2 because here the Hindley-Milner can took a hint and it can already guess which types have to be.
Well,
here.
I'm not using color in Hindley-Milner to type it here. So I can take your example though, Theodore, if you want. You can make a tuple out of it and return two results just by putting a paren and don't use the word color. But yeah, Hindley-Milner, same problem. He's trying to type that C in light 2, and he wants to type the 2 different locations of the dot unders, and each of them has to resolve to some field that has an operator minus with an int or an operator, or on the right hand side, an operator plus of a string.
This is pseudo Scala because I'm trying to have to be at least string.
So when you
did you use this feature in your language to write essentially type switch?
Oh, probably.
Because I know a lot of languages that have switching on the type of a thing as a core language feature.
Right. Well, there's ISA.
But I feel like this may let you just write type switch in the libraries.
When you say type switch, this have to resort to a runtime testing of the type.
No, this is all typing, static typing. The underscore resolves to a single field at typing time. It is not a runtime thing. And that was a known choice I made. So for a typing of, I'm going to have an ISA that'll support the nested hierarchy of structs. Like you have structs and you can do subclassing on structs and just add more fields. Fine, you do ISA. That's not implemented. I don't see any semantic issue with ISA in a typing system here. It'll be Hindley-Milner flavored ISA. But I don't think there's any object here. I can restructure your light, make another version of light here that would pass. Oh, come on, go away, Google. It's trying to get me to do a calendar. But see, now my one field has to be acceptable to a string here.
Why should the compiler care what order I put my fields in?
Because he's
For a
going
struct.
by names and he has to pick a name.
Right, but the name is .a, not .0.
Well, and having you said that made me realize this will just fail because there's no .a. If it's all tuples, we'll pick a .0. You're correct. So I'm wrong here. This will also fail. There is no
Like if it's a tuple, who should pick .0, and if it's a struct, he should pick .a. But he shouldn't care what order the struct is in unless.
Yeah, he picks a field name. Tuples are structs whose field names are 0, 1, 2.
Because you kind of want it to be able to shuffle things around in structs so that it can
Yes.
do polymorphism things without
So
quite so many
a
versions.
better answer for my second case here is I need an RGB field. And I need a name field because that's what I have. And those can be in any order. This is okay.
As well as there can be any extra junk.
And extra junk's okay, and orders unresolved is okay. And that's because when I do layouts, I'll have to force a layout where the fields are compatible because of the dot underscore demands them to be compatible. But that's a layout thing, and the optimizer can do that for just fine. So you could do this. This would work, where the names uses c.name and c.rgb in the appropriate places.
For your tuple syntax.
Yeah.
So for braces, you have the @ in front to distinguish between this is a code block and this is a struct.
Yeah.
Why don't you have an @ at the beginning of your tuples to distinguish between I'm just grouping code so that you know what order to do things in versus I'm making a new tuple?
Because I don't need it. Because tuples, everyone writes tuples with an open paren, a list, and a closed paren. So I wanted to match that syntax, and I made it unambiguous. Outside of structs, I made it unambiguous versus grouping. So you can group things in a tuple. Sorry, you can group things with parens, and they'll do grouping, and you can make a tuple, and those two are in fact different, and they will be distinguishable at parsing time.
Should I interrupt or should I wait until the topic change?
No, this is you got a new topic change.
It's not a new topic. It's just relevant to what you just said.
Pile in.
So that reminds me of last week when I said that I switched the order of ands and ors. I do ors before I process the ands because I like to or everything together. You were saying math does it the other way.
Yeah, you did.
I was just wondering.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if anyone else thought about it since I said it, and if you guys prefer it to doing and first or higher precedence, or if or should be the higher precedence. I'm still sticking with the or.
Okay. I answered that one already on Discord. I can't answer it again. Somebody else has to answer. I'm going to scroll the screen a little bit here. Recenter things. And whoever wrote the tuple thing, yeah, that's what happens. If you have a comment in there, you start getting a tuple.
So I don't need the @ because the comma can disambiguate the tuple, even if it's a tuple of one thing.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I do it. Yeah. And if you put something after the comma, you get a 2-item tuple.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that didn't give me a tuple of 2 and null.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It gives you the one element tuple. Just like you.
Because if I did that, I would get a tuple of 2 and null.
I'll probably throw a syntax error on that one. Semicolon is a statement separator. You can have statements within arguments in a tuple, and the last one wins.
This entire section of the tuple is the statement that gets terminated.
Yeah, maybe.
I feel like that should give me a tuple of 2.
I want to run that through the parser.
I don't know if it does.
Right. I want to run through the parser and see what it does. This is a grammar ambiguity question. An empty statement gives you the left-hand side as its right-hand side result. It's just like a no-op. So you can put semicolons in a row, everything's an expression. And if you pile on semicolons, whatever the last thing got computed, that's the answer to the last semicolon.
Right.
Here,
And I want that behavior so that for a function where I want the function to return null, I can just stick a semicolon at the end and be like, don't return this last thing. Here's a semicolon, like end it, return the null.
The semicolon here, I bet you gives an error because there's no expression on the left of the semicolon. I didn't have an expression. I found a semicolon. I was expecting an expression. I'm guessing. I'd have to ask the person. But
so it's going to complain that there's no expression there. It's not going to decide that that empty expression is null.
No, there has to be a first expression, and then you can semicolon and add more expressions afterwards. There must be a first one.
But if I had a function block, that's going to set A to null, right?
No, that sets A to a function that takes no arguments, and the function returns a 1. Okay, that calls that function, which returns a 1. It sets A to a 1.
Why doesn't that function return null? Because I've got a semicolon at the end.
The semicolon takes its left-hand side value as its result. So any number of semicolons for empty blocks always take the thing to their left. And there has to be a thing to your left or you get a syntax error.
Okay, so rather than this first one giving me 1 and the second one giving me null,
they both give you 1.
If I want this thing to return null,
that might be helpful.
I actually have to explicitly say null?
No, you explicitly say 0.
0.
Because it's your cursor, my cursor, yes. There's another version here which maybe shows you what semicolon does. So all the semicolons just carry the left-hand side through, just return to 1. So now you are.
Oh no, that's not where the type information goes.
Yes,
the type information
go
goes
after the 1 if you want to do
there.
that, or you put it down here as a function which returns a 0. Yes. No, that's not where you put the return type of a function. That's the type of the whole function. Can go there. That's a function that takes.
Where do I put the return type of a function?
I'm sorry.
So where do I specify the return type of a function?
Inside after the 0. Just move it to move that .0 to the left of the close curly. It's a swap. You just swap the two. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure I like that because that could be arbitrarily far away from the parameters.
Well, the other one's arbitrarily far away from parameters too. You literally moved it 2 characters only ever. You move it to the left or the right of the closed curly.
Yeah. There's something tempting about just being like, I want to describe this.
Okay, you put the other one is you put it on the A variable on the left-hand side of the equals of the assignment. A colon is a function that takes no args and returns a 0. Equals, and then the actual function implementation. So you can put it on the A, and you can put it after any expression, which a function is an expression. So you can put it after the closed curly on a function because that's just an expression, and you put a type on it. Fine. If you put it inside, if you want just return, you have to put it on the return of the function.
So this way I can say, here is my function.
Yes.
And the type of that function
is
a function that returns 0.
Yes. And there is another version of that, as I'm saying here, which you can put it on the A. And then you can assign it some function implementation that happens to return a 0.
Oh, I like that much better.
Okay. So, and the return type goes, here, whatever, I'm going to call capital RT for return type. You can have it here, you can put it there, and you can repeat the function because it's some expression here. Everywhere I said RT, you can put the return type of your function. The 2 at the end to the right are all very close to each other because they're only separated by the closed curly and the colon for the typing.
Yeah. But I think for most of my code, I would want to put the type on the A.
Yeah, if you don't,
because I like to keep both my parameters and my return type kind of together.
Yeah. It's just like a classic, I don't know, it's like C, except you move the name from in between the args and the return to the left-hand side, but the set of args and return and the name are all near each other. And then you have the body, which could get big,
All right. I'm going to hop to my next meeting and probably watch the video for this one to make sure that I understand the underscore.
Oh, underscore was fun. All right. Yeah. Have fun. I had a question. Who wrote Scala for the typing? Theodore, what were you trying to write there?
I was trying to figure out what the type Scala equivalent type would be here. And it turns out to be some kind of a type lambda in Scala 3, because you don't know this type. You only know has to have the minus, the minus operator
minus. Yeah.
and the operator plus. And if you want to make it work, you have to bound. You have to be compatible with int, and here you have to be compatible with string. If you don't want to specify the type, you have to go structural. You have to have a which is subtype of something that has a minus, that has a def minus, and the left hand side is the a itself, and
that's
the right
exactly the type I make, by the way.
How different you can make it, because you're out of options. You have to have,
this is plus on a string though, so I swapped the order.
The B type. Okay, that's fine, that's probably fine. But you have to make that decision at the defining the function. Here, the Hindley-Milner and combination will figure out something close to this one.
Yeah. In the end, I get down to I
Because
have an unresolved field and a set of choices, and it's monotonic. If you ever fail, you'll never type again. So I can throw you out of my list of choices. And if I get down to 1, I win. If I have 2 or more, I throw an ambiguity error at you. If I go down to 0, I get a no matching choices. But if I end up with exactly 1, then that's the type, and I name the field at that point and move on.
Because specifying structural types becomes pretty ugly pretty fast, and inferring the type is much more viable.
Yes. Yeah, writing these out in the test cases, you get some brutal looking types. Yeah.
That's not what you want a user to do, because
no, right. No, I don't expect a user to write those types. They're ugly.
So I'm like Aaron, I'm still grasping the dot underscore. I believe I catch the gist semantic of it. It's like searching for to bound a symbol from whatever you are selecting.
Yeah. I walk your struct and I look for a match. Like in the algorithm, the implementation's kind of straightforward, except I've incrementalized everything.
I'm not sure. There was an example that it has to be a tuple, and we later renamed the cover to a struct. I'm not sure you can go with the tuple going from left to right. This has to be the first field of the struct. That it has to be the second field.
So it does not have to be first or second. They have to have compatible name.
Okay.
Tuples have names 0, 1, 2. So if I pick field name is 1, then everybody who calls there has to pass be a tuple where they have a field 1 labeled 1 is assigned with that compatible type.
But why not go somewhere in between the Scala root that every case class, every struct has to be anonymously convertible to a tuple and selected from the first field of the struct and the second field from the struct.
Right.
Would be the same.
Because I had trouble making that algorithm sort of known monotonic. That I went down that path for a while. There's maybe a solution there. It's not obvious. The problem I have is that I have 2 different ways to count. I have a count from field number, and I have a count from the label name. And what really happens is I'm going to reorder your fields anyhow. So you've had a second label name based on the user's ordering of 0, 1, 2. And that one I could probably also do. And then I would always pick the 0, 1, 2. I would say, whatever field name you have across all these guys, I'm just taking them 0, 1, 2. And then I'm going to call them 0, 1, 2, but they'll have different names at different places. And then the weirdness then is if I say C.1, that will work on a guy who has the first slot independent of its name. And in other places, I have people who do unification based on the names when the names can be unordered. They're not arbitrarily ordered. They're not sorted or anything. And so, so there's no 1 field one doesn't unambiguously select between the correct field choices for two different things at a unification. So in the larger unification problem, where I'm mixing up all kinds of structs with things, if I have this one field floating around, it doesn't know whether you meant the first amongst choices, like the name is in the first guy, the first field in the one guy, and the name is in the 10th field in the second guy, and I unified dot names because I can unify dot names. But now what does dot one mean? Does it mean the first or the 10th or something in between? So I couldn't make that one. I couldn't come up with an unambiguous answer. And Levo, I see you typing away, so we'll get to you in a second here. You have very long lines that wrap for me. It'd be nice if you made a block comment out of that long line and then it didn't wrap. Because it's hard to read your wrap. Well, okay. Is that answer, Theodore, as much as clear as
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay. The bug wasn't the dot under getting numbered 012 versus field 012. The bug was name is in one position in one struct, name is in a different position in another struct. If I pick name, then the ordering is not compatible between the two.
Yeah, it's CSS. You can either refer to it by name or by position or by offset.
Yes, but if I can't mix position and offset together, then I'm both broken. And that was the problem I was getting into. Okay. For Levo, what are you trying to ask here? Okay, you have a bool with a question mark. So you have a nullable bool. You're asking, is it the false bool? This is legal. I see this should be an error if the language checks for null. Do you prefer this not to be an error since null and true are both unequal to false? Yeah, okay, so Levo, that's like semantics, how you want to do it. If I look at the Java semantics, where bool is just capital B bool is just a Java object. It's nothing more than a wrapper around a bit. It's a Java object. Now I come in with a Java object. I ask the question, is this Java object equal to false? What is false? False is another Java object. I have two Java objects. Are they equal or not? Those semantics are well understood. They're equals in some cases and unequals in others. Okay, now it's nullable. I ask it is equal to false. I happen to know that false is never equal to null. So I'm really asking, is Java null equal to Java null, or C null is equal to C null? And the answer is, well, one of them's null, one of them's not null. The answer is always no. So not a compile error, not a runtime error. Simply the answer is false. You don't execute that this is legal code. I think that one's easy. And then the nullable question mark says, I allow a null. Oh, in the first one in the land of Java and C, we would just allow a null because the thing is typed just to allow a null. Your testing is 2 pointers equal in the first case. Null is a valid pointer value. So you just do a pointer check, including null equal null or null equals something and something equals null and something, something. Okay. The second case, you had a question mark. I don't think that changes your semantics or could change your semantics per se.
Well, in my language, I'm planning to make it so if something can be null, you have to check for null before you do anything else.
Okay, so it's not.
So that's why I'm having a new syntax.
Okay. And that one, and the second one, it says I'm allowing you to be a null, and I just do pointer check where null is a valid pointer. And the first case, I first null check, I throw an exception. Actually, at compile time, I throw an exception saying you didn't check this guy for null before you used it in a test. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. So I think it's less bug prone because somebody may have checked if it's null, but maybe they would want a case if it can be nullable. But since they didn't realize it's nullable, they just didn't write the case, and it seems to me it could cause some bugs. So I say if something can be null, you have to like acknowledge it somehow.
But you have to have a top type. Any reference type can be null by most languages. So the reference to the type can be null.
I think I'm hearing what he's saying is if it can be a null, the first thing I do with it is, I guess I can assign it to something else. Either I assign it or I have to check the null and do specific null handling.
I know languages like Java would just let you write that if statements, like the first one.
Yeah, the problem
But-
here is you're using nullable bool. Replace nullable bool with nullable person.
Well, my question is more like, should it be an error? Because I think
Yeah.
it should be, and I
And
know
what
other
I'm saying
people.
is you're biasing your answers by the choice of name bool. Change bool to be person objects, city objects, county objects, something. And the goal is to look at this without having the bool bias. Like, it's just like bool, nullable bool's false. I'm already like going to three-way logic and shit like that. As soon as I say I'm a person and then I'm missing a person or I have a person, it changes how I feel about it. I'm not going to say nullable person equal false. That's obviously never true. So I want nullable person is equal to missing person or not a person or something like that. I have a special not a person thing.
That's just a reference type. Any reference type can be a null. It happens. This bool with the question mark should equal option, which is a reference type, which can be null.
Yeah,
itself.
you could relate the question mark, remove the question mark and replace it with the word option. And that is over a bool, right? Option of the type of, and I claim that that's a lot of typing, and I hated it when I did it in Elm.
That's how you want to represent the question mark.
Well, I want, okay. I want to write the question mark. I want the presentation semantically to be something like option bool. I want the implementation at runtime to be a fucking null under the hood, the Rust zero cost overhead for option.
Yeah, that's
There's kind of three things here. There's a semantics, it's option. There's a syntax, it's the question mark. There's the implementation, it's just the raw hex86.0.
So in Livo case, anything that has a question mark automatically becomes a reference type and has to be checked for null.
Yeah, and I'm in a different, I'm a different realm. I'm close.
Yeah.
All
it has
my,
to be
all my
total, you have to
structs.
check.
The other thing I was thinking about was if nullable is the same as might be an error, you would always want to check if something is an error. Even like if you replace nullable bool to might be an error bool, you would always want to know if it's an error. So I thought maybe it should carry on to null too.
The question here is how to say widens the program to be able to accept something of a different type of something different other than true and false. It can be null.
You get three states instead of two.
So
And that's where I say you shouldn't do that. You should let the programmer ask for three states by writing three states.
So if you write an int with a question mark,
I do not allow int question mark.
A reference type that can be reduced to, let's say, in this program there has an integer that can be represented, that there isn't an integer in your program, and you can represent the state. That is a deeper meaning behind here.
So the issue with the int question mark is there's a performance problem. You needed a 65th bit to say it's missing. And suddenly your costs to use that integer have doubled, basically.
Or you have some integer that can represent the missing state.
Yeah, so if you go look at Zig and how they do error codes and stuff, they basically make enums and they pick the missing as one of the missing values out of the enum. And I'm okay with that as well, but I asked the programmer to go write that enum instead of adding it in the language syntax.
That's
I like
still
using hidden parameters.
There's a cost to that. That's what I was saying with the int question mark. You need a 65th bit.
What do you mean by hidden parameters?
Well, since okay, so if this was going to be in a strut and there's like 5 fields that could be null and they're all ints, you can have a hidden member that's a car that will carry the 5 bits if it's null or not.
Yeah.
So that's like a hidden member. Yeah. Or in a function case with parameters you're passing in, it would be one parameter that's
shifting multiple returns to the parameter itself, and you either have multiple returns or you carry you widen your type you're passing in with something that you can test for it.
There's some way, yes, you have to add more state.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, but you can pass it. I hear Levo. I think that's a valid answer.
Of
Pass extra
course.
fields, extra bits.
There is no right and wrong answer
Yeah.
here. That's as
Well,
long as-
the one thing that I hear no right or wrong on is that as a performance programmer, I have an unexpected performance behavior for this thing, because the costs to do this jump a lot over a standard int. I see people make this mistake all the time without ever realizing it. They used a capital I int because they used a normal Java hash table, and their program sucks, and the costs are everywhere and smeared throughout the program, and it's just slow, and they don't like it. And I get called in to do consulting gigs, and the first step is, oh God, guys, quit doing that. And suddenly their allocation rate drops by tenfold, their GC costs drop by tenfold, the performance doubles and triples, and it's like a huge performance loss. There's a big numbers associated with this shit.
I agree. That is a big jump to just one capital letter. And so,
Yeah, and that's the reason my AA choices say, if you ask for things that can be slow, you have to ask for them. So you don't get surprised by your code running like shit and not understanding why.
I'm surprised that the optimizer doesn't realize that this can be a lowercase int.
It cannot realize it.
that's a runtime decision. It can, if you have to know that there is some integer that can represent the null type, so it can drop the null type and back to again box and rewrite it back to a primitive int.
Yeah, what you wrote is normally boxed. Unboxing means I have to set aside a state and test that particular state coming through. But I don't know what int you're not going to use. The caller of my func could pass all possible ints. I can't reserve one. So
I've forgotten like almost all the Java I ever knew. It's been a while.
This is nothing with Java. This is all about optimizing compilers. This same problem shows up in every language that uses a capital I int under the hood.
I'm not. What's the difference between capital I and lowercase?
Capital I int is a standard object, like in C++ object. It's allocated on the heap. It has a heap representation. It has a mark and a class header words. It supports vtable calls, virtual function calls. It's a standard object.
Lowercase is the primitive.
Lowercase is the primitive. That's a pile of bits in an x86 machine register.
And fit in a register.
And it fits in a register, yeah. One has memory, one does not. One you can tell int of 7 can be different from another int of 7 because it's two different objects with two different pointers. And the other one is a 7 is a 7 is a 7 is a 7, and they can't tell them apart. One does an allocation every time you make a new version because you said capital I int, which happens to be 7 version, and you added +1, you get a new capital I int of an 8 and a 9, a 10. Pretty soon you got a billion capital I ints, and I literally mean a billion of them, and they all take memory, and suddenly you're at 4 bytes time. Well, no, 4 words, 30 bytes times a billion ints. You said burn 32 gigs. That runs through your garbage collector because nearly all of them are garbage, and your garbage collector is just swimming through seas and seas of shit, and that's your performance.
I do have a related question. So you're talking about JVM specifically.
No, I'm talking about.
Well, no, you're not, but I am. So
okay.
Java does math in 32 bits minimum. So if you got a bool and you're whatever, if you got a byte,
it does not map 32 bits for a bool. It does not map 32 bits for a bool minimum. That is not correct.
Okay, so we'll throw out bool then. So what is the cost or the effective expense of Java's choice that byte is 32 bits, short is 32 bits, everything is promoted to 32 bits. Okay. Maybe not in the storage, but at the,
yes, that's the error that you're making here. In storage, short is 16 bits and Boolean is 1 byte, but it could be 1 bit. In registers, you want to use the natural register size of the machine. That's 32 bits in a register. It uses 1 register, not 32 bits per se. It is using 32 bits in a register. It's using 1 register. That's the cost. So and using anything less than that is actually more expensive because x86 is so fucking optimized for using full register width. Does that help you get the performance choices here?
Okay.
In
it
the
helps
register,
a little bit
it's free
to know that the CPU is corresponding to the Java decisions of math. Does that go all the way back to 386?
Yes. The Java decision of on the Java virtual machine stack, so we're going JVM bytecode stack of using one 32-bit word for Boolean, those will map to one register on an x86. And that's the most efficient way you can make that go. When you do in memory for storage classes like array, well, in arrays and structs, they're compressed down to 16 or 1 bit or whatever the storage class is for that type.
Do you lose any bandwidth by taking that cheap route when you do have streaming bytes?
No, because the thing the x86 will do is just widen you out anyhow. So we need to be very careful here. In the land of H2O, I did a specific hack, which is unusual to save because I know I'm streaming bytes. So I would load up fat piles of bytes as a single x86 load op, and then the loop would pick one byte at a time out by shifting. That was done by C2. My Java code didn't ever write that shit. I just said I'm using byte by byte, but in a loop that I'll know will unroll. When it unrolls, C2 will do the alignment and go grab things 1 watt at a time and pick the bits out as you use them. So I relied on the JIT to make that go down the path that you'd expect out of like a decent mem copy, because I'm doing big data math. So after I peeled the thing out and expanded it to its full size, I did some other algebra according to what the mathematician was writing code for.
Okay, so there's a few of those things in C2 that catch the falling apples.
Yes, if you have to kind of be a little careful how you write your code. It has to be very clean, very straightforward, not very big, or you won't inline enough. But if you have something that says, I got an array of bytes, and I say for I equals 1 to bajillion bytes, I load a byte and do some screwy thing like I'm doing hash code for string, which is shift by 5 and subtract 1, and then lather, rinse, repeat. Well, that's tiny code. He'll unroll that a few times, and then he'll have 4 load bytes with +1 offsets, and he'll say, if I align this, I can do a load word in a shift by fucking, shift byte extract thing, and then he'll do that game. You'll pick up the simple ones if they're simple enough. If they're big, now you'll get load byte, load byte, load byte, load byte.
Okay.
And it won't really matter if they're big, because the cost of 4 load bytes versus 1 load word is small enough that that's your dominant cost that matters. But if you have other things going, not much more other things going on, you won't care.
All right. So I assume float 4 is totally out of the question right now.
A 4,
float.
what do you mean? A float is a 4. What do you mean a float 4?
It's a 2-bit representation of float.
You're talking about 4-bit floats.
There is actually
Okay.
neural networks now being implemented as float 4 reductions of previous networks.
What's a float 4?
I don't really know, but I guess they're using 4 bits for a float.
Okay. As opposed to a float 4 bytes, which is a standard float. That's a 32-bit float. That's a normal float.
So the rule is the more native can be represented in the CPU, that route is more profitable.
Yeah. Somebody wants to go take 4-bit floats for doing bad neural network behaviors. I don't know. When I was doing H2O neural networks, 4-bit floats were not going to be exciting over 32-bit floats. I don't know, maybe 8-bit kind of, sort of, but not on the CPU directly. That'd just be too expensive, because he has
They
to
can
take
do
all the hardware.
they can make the trained networks do the same thing after
Right,
the
right. As soon as you
training.
throw custom hardware, some NVIDIA GPU-y thing, I don't know.
No,
it may help.
it's for desktops. That's anyways, okay.
Yeah, you need
Java's
custom
not
hardware to do
target.
the 4-bit float, because the software's 4-bit float semantics will suck for performance. There's no hardware acceleration. Once you got hardware acceleration, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, that was my main question. It's been
Okay.
on my thinking for weeks actually to ask that.
Okay, so now I have anonymous Python saying, so I don't forget, does something change the int on the caller side? And the answer for Java is parameters are passed by value. you've assigned a parameter. So it's changed locally, not on the caller side. Done. The caller never sees a change. Does that make sense?
It makes somewhat sense. I'm still not sure what's if something's an object, it's passed by reference and it will be modified.
Okay, you have to be careful here. The pointer is passed by value. So if you write to the pointer, you wrote the local pass by value pointer, and so that's just replaced inside. If you passed a person instead of a
Okay, it just
Yeah.
clicked. Yeah.
Okay, if I say person P and I say P.age because of my birthday came around, I just did a reference update of the .age field. Other people holding a copy of my person pointer pointing to the same shared object saw the ++. That did get passed up to the caller. But the person that got passed down did not.
So I'm a little unsure why why compilers can't or the JITs can't replace capital int with lowercase int. But
Okay.
I don't care that much. I
Oh,
just
okay.
it's just not clicking for me.
It's because the semantics are different. There's a performance cost and a semantic change. To prove that it's a legit transformation, you have to show there's no semantic change. I can't write a Java program that can detect that you secretly slid a little int under my big int.
In simple cases, like, I don't know, you use integer with big I as a loop induction variable, we would actually do this. We would convert it to a primitive.
Yes, in simple cases, C2 will do that too, in simple cases, yes. But in the general case, no. And things like hash table, which take all callers from all directions, no. He doesn't have a replacement strategy that works sort of naively. You have to do what JavaScript does and sort of code clone, split code, do type specialization, monomorphization. It's complicated things to go figure that one out.
I'm glad how simple my compiler is, even though it doesn't look simple.
Right. This is all about your semantics and what you choose for semantics. Some semantics can be mapped to efficient code, some cannot. And in the early days of computer world, computers being 1,000 times slower, you wanted efficient code. So those mappings became baked into all kinds of languages. Then the computers got faster and people wanted, more broader, more mathematical-like semantics. They took a cost overhead and they were all fine. And then one day they realized the cost overhead actually sucked. And also computers quit getting faster. You got more, but not more faster. Suddenly performance is important again.
It blows my mind that I don't know of another compiler that does like 1 million lines per second.
Oh, no. I think that they've been around, but we wouldn't hardly call them a compiler. What you're doing is a little special, but not hugely. I've seen very fast translations from one form to another. You have more of an ASCII readable presentation to transform one to another that's fast. But I've certainly seen things that'll take some kind of x86, another kind of bytecode, and turn it into x86 ops at a speed. Actually, probably V8 is probably pretty close for just plain naive JavaScript. The first run before they start kicking in the JIT, the first run translation is probably pretty damn fast. That's a main.
There is like a lot of type checking in my compiler, but
yeah, you're doing something a little different. The things I'm talking about were more like translators from a generic bytecode-like format to x86, where the generic bytecode-like format had already been type checked, but it was generic because they were converting to a RISC that was going to run like this. Is one time with transmeta here, but they weren't the first people to do this game either. You convert from one form to another, but it's a little more structured in those cases, so it was easier to get faster. And you could get so fast that you were memory bandwidth bound, and that changed your rules on what you wanted to do with it. I'm claiming you're interestingly fast. I'm not sure I want to write 1 million lines of Boolean code. But
yeah, hopefully no one needs to write that many.
But the compile edit turnaround time, looks appealing. I want to make sure my compile edit turnaround time is fast enough and I can hit my button, have it pop up and go. So
yeah, I got.
When you adding new features, be ready to brace the slowdown.
Race the slowdown.
The only way it's going to slow down is if I make an architectural change, and the only thing that can change would probably be memory safety.
I want to see your memory safety get worked out, because you got like half a concept in your head that might hit the 90% mark. And if you can cover up the holes for the 10%, these go slow, we have to manual, but here I got the 90% case going fast and well without any thinking. That could be cool. That could be cool. There's a thing there.
The problem is just like a lot of code I have to write to get there.
Here I am.
What's another 100,000?
Hey. It's not been a fast path, that's for sure.
Yeah. I want to finish it, but it's still like 100,000, and
yeah. All right. I'm detecting a slowdown here. We're going to change topics, or I'm going to call at the end here.
So I was going back over the discussion we had, and so it turned into a discussion. I forgot this, but it turned into a discussion about enumerated types. And so the question was, there were two ways essentially to make an enum. Either you say an enum is a value is a name for an integer, or you say an enum value is a separate type. So
yeah.
I don't think we ever actually figured out.
No,
I mean,
I don't know that we could. Those are like interesting design choices leading to different behaviors in enums. Zig's error codes have all the enums run together as an int because they want to have that performance model, and because they want to say under the hood, all the error nodes, all the no errors are always a test for 0, and all other errors have their own special E underbar, blah, blah, blah field name. It's an interesting hack. It works well with OS related codes. It can be checked for completeness and other, performance is good, blah, blah, blah. It's fine. It's not like what you'd get out of a Java or an Elm or a C++ enum. I guess maybe kind of similar what you get out of a C++ enum, maybe.
In my code base, I have mixing enums set as a warning, and then I set that warning as an error. So in my code base, there's no mixing. They're like their own separate type.
Yeah, Zig admits that their mixing is part of their weirdness budget. It's special. They renumber the enum values under the hood so they don't collide in the mix. That's part of their specialness.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. They do it at typing time, basically. If they can't do it, I think that you'll get some kind of complaint out of them. And you can have many errors be the same name being mixed, and they'll give them the same name. But if you have a unique named guy in one error class and a unique named guy in another error class, they'll get different numbers, and they have to renumber under the hood to make that work. Yeah, fine.
Is this renumbering all enums or just the error ones?
It's whatever Zig does for error codes, which is a special flavor of enums. I don't know if they have any other kind of enums. You can go ask Zig. It's an interesting read. It's an interesting concept. I
think I like that. I just don't know nothing about Zig.
Go ziglang.org, maybe Zig something. It's easy to find. They do some cool stuff too. They do cross compilation as a normal everyday standard build process. Always cross compilation across CPU targets.
Yeah, the few times I tried it, it seems interesting. And a couple months ago, I found out that you could just instead of like getting a C compiler on Windows, you could just use Zig, and it would just like not require anything. Like they had no dependencies.
Yeah.
I always thought that you needed to install CLang with it, but I completely did not realize they packaged it.
Oh no, yeah. So Zig cross compiles and self builds and all kinds of cool stuff. They've done a good job there. It's not necessarily where I want to go, but it's not bad either. It's some good stuff. What was something? What were you asking, Alan? Oh, enums. Yes, semantically there's another thing there, which is like logically enums are all not related to any integer, or logically under the hood I know I'm going to get an integer and I can peek through and see the end.
Right. Well, there's the conceptual value is like can you compare an enum and an integer, for example? And then
Right,
there's
okay.
like the representation, do you actually have, I mean, obviously, you want, we have this discussion that you don't want to use pointers for enums. So
Right, there's a cost model there, right? You'd like it.
Actually, any enum can be easily converted to an integer. So that was the problem. From left to right, from 0 increment in the index, and that's is like every instance of the enum has its own identity, which is the integer. So that is the easy way to compare them.
right, so the question is, do you say the integer is the enum, or do you have to say that the enum
The
is
enum
like
is represented at runtime as integer.
right? So the question, well, that's the
Good typing
question. If I
question.
want to compare an enum and an integer, do I have to write convert enum to integer before I
That would
do
be a sensible thing to do, because you have to know that you're comparing typos and speeches.
So here's another use case. I have this enum, and I'm going to use it in a table lookup because I just want to convert it to something else reasonably efficiently with no function calls. I just do a table lookup. I have an array, sub brackets, and I put the enum in it. Do I need to convert it to an int and do the lookup, or can I just let the language say it's being used in an int context? Use it as an int.
Or inside the definition of the enum, you say that you want to be convertible to an int.
Okay, yeah. There's a version of that too. Yeah. Yeah, I had a plan for enums on AA where I could make subclassing and name things, and you could get good type safety. And then I replaced how all that shit worked when I did this operator fixing thing, operator overload thing, and now I have to rethink what I can do with enums. But I have more opportunities now. I should be able to make an int that is an enum class that behaves like an int and behaves like an enum, and I can probably even make it that you can get an error if you want. Any conversion to an int is an error or free, either way.
And along one of the trade-off I think of when you're converting an enums to an int, there has to be an upper bound. You have to enum with 10 implementations, then you have an integer with max value at 10. If you compare with a different integer, you have to make sure you don't go overboard.
Okay, yeah, I would not. I'm not going to do the make sure part of that. I'm going to claim if you're converting it to an int and comparing it in a context to other ints, it's just an int. Now after conversion, you're saying I have two ints, one's an enum and one's not. And before I allow the conversion from enum to int, I want to check the other int to make sure.
If you're widening, that's fine. The enum becomes an integer. But if you want to go the other way around from
if you inject, you have to check. Yeah, that one totally makes sense. Yes, if I convert an int to an enum, there better be a check. Yeah.
I think most of the times I have my enums variables never mixed with integers. I'm not sure why people would intentionally want to do that. Like, I feel like I'm missing a use case, or if it's just out of habit.
It comes up to me all the time, and then I avoid enums fairly frequently when it might make sense, because I know I've got these conversions I have to go manually screw with, and it's not.
Oh, you would absolutely do that for template hacks, or not template, macro hacks in C and C++.
Yeah, in C and C++ all the time. Yeah, definitely there.
So yeah, I can understand using an enum variable as array index, but other than that, I don't know when I want it as an int.
It might be
array. Yeah, enum has an end, a beginning and an end range. Usually, the end range is the most important for a loop.
Oh,
and
right.
Then you can reify the string in line of the enum name along with a cardinal value that matters.
Right. So for I equals enum to colon or whatever, I is enum value colon collection of enum or whatever. There's some limit. Yes.
I do have a lot of asserts and static asserts that mixes enums comparisons with integers. I do have that. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Well, that's different from putting it into an integer.
No, you're converting it to an integer context and then doing an int compare.
Well, it comes out as a bool, so technically I think it's different.
I'm sorry, you can, what I heard you say is I have a bunch of enums I'm using in comparing to integers, and then I'm going to get a bool out of it. That's a
Yeah,
that's a three-step
so
process. You widen to an int, you compared it to another int, that gave you a bool.
the
right?
widening is not being put into a variable. That's what I'm
Yes,
concerned about. It's
you,
like
you
I don't know
verified the
why.
lifetime of the widening to be that expression. Now you're asking the compiler to always allow widening or not always allow widening, and thus you can track the lifetime in all contexts that he didn't escape the widened version. And that's where it gets hard. So instead, you just blindly widen. Now you got an int. Ugh.
There is also the little use case of numbering bits if you don't want to do it manually.
Yes, certainly in C code, a lot of numbering bits. Yes. Manually hand rolled bit masks of this, that, and the other thing. A lot of that going on. Hotspot's full of that crap. I'm building x86 ops. There's all kind of bit twiddly things that have semantic overloaded meaning of what registers and whether or not I have to use the extended opcode flavored with a prefix byte and blah, blah, blah. Tons of stupid bit twiddly things going on where enums are all over the map in C code. Bit masks on enums and everything else. All right, fine. Now we're getting closer to noon. Anyone want to add any more comments before I'm going to wind it down here? All quiet. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, let's call it quits. We meet again. That was a fun conversation, actually. We went kind of around the block in a couple of directions.
I completely forgot. I do have one question. It's about presentations. Do you guys have any favorite softwares to like create slides, and do you have any tips on creating presentations?
I can step you through a lot of presentation things, but I don't like my current software stack for building slides. I tell you, I'm using OpenOffice. I don't like it. I don't like Word. That has to be something more clever in life. Fine. But if you want to go
GraphViz
like
all the way.
what?
GraphViz.
GraphViz all the way. Okay.
Dot.
Jeez. That sounds hardcore, but maybe I need to go there. You know, could be.
I managed to get away with just HTML for the moment, but
Yeah, that's also kind of suck. Gives
big
you more
time.
control, but you got to write all kind of low-level bits.
I used Beamer once. It's like this LaTeX package, but I don't know. It kind of works. I honestly like. I just like pasting images into OpenOffice. Like
I do, yes.
I make the images in whatever software, and then I just paste them into OpenOffice. I don't use any of the slide layout or anything.
Yeah, all the slide layout, slide transition games all never worked for me in any way I wanted to use them at. I'm with Jim. There's like GraphViz, and it sounds like suck. I don't want to go there, but maybe I do. Fine. And then the other bits of presentation are how you arrange your stuff and how you stand and talk, and then how you handle evil questions from the audience. There's a bunch of things I can step you through, Levo, that give you all of its practice. Not now, let's not do it now, but there's definitely stuff to do. Just like any sport in the world, practice will help you, even if it's just in front of a mirror. All right. Till we meet again.
See y'all.
Bye-bye.